Turns out there are some things in life that I just can't control. The birds around me are screaming. To bring awareness to that cosmic timer. To know that it all must end. It is what keeps me going and brings me to a stop. Paralyzed by the weight of ambition, horrified at the mere ticking of a clock. From the very moment our species was first capable of making enunciated grunts and cave paintings as forms of emotional expression, we humans have been academically, artistically, philosophically desperate to deconstruct our collective understanding of death. The cessation of life, one of the commonalities that link us together as mortal beings, stood as one of the very few facts of life that every human must experience and confront. Ancient cave murals from more than 8,000 years ago depict our early grapplings and understandings of our mortality. The ancient Greeks and the ancient Egyptians both had different personifications of death. Yet in a world full of frontiers in which humans are beginning to claw back the veil of the unknown to garner some finite understanding of the universe around us, death remains as one of life's few unanswerables. How is it that in 8 millennia, a universal truth so ghastly and overwhelming, we spend our lives avoiding and running from such an inevitability? Now look, it would take me a lifetime to unpack all of the books, movies, plays, video games, poems, symphonies, religions, and cave paintings that discuss, personify, and pontificate on the machinations of death. There is enough death-related media to take me to my doctorate and then back. But there are 2 pieces of media that philosophically and artistically unpack our willingness to distract ourselves from the arbitrary and unexplainable nature of our existence by constructing hero systems that give us semblances of constructed purpose in the face of unanswerable questions such as life. But before I do that, I want to address the feeling in the room. It is not as though I am blind to the fact that to contemplate on death is terrifying. I've struggled immensely with a crippling fear of death and of dying. The concept of nothingness forever is as real as the tightening in my chest and the shortening of my breath as I get lost in that beyond. There have been many moments, journal entries, and sad introspective poems like the one you saw at the beginning, that I've written in an attempt to unwind this feeling to little or to no avail. But in my time contemplating on my deepest fear, I have found that the concept of death, as horrifying and as inexplainable as it may be, tells us a lot about our desperation to answer everything. And only by letting go are we capable of molding our perception of death into something both beautiful because of its impermanence and instinctively human. So please, as best you can, try to release that tightness in your chest. Realizing that no feeling could ever possibly be permanent allows us to perceive the beauties that are just as fleeting. But allow that feeling to exist. It is not something to run from or disguise. It is a primal, animalistic fear that, when confronted, can make all of our other anxieties feel so human-made and trivial. I don't know if you know this, but I'm actually not the first person to notice that we die. In Ernest Becker's book, The Denial of Death, he goes over all of the ways that humanity, denies ourselves our death, posits that modern society has constructed a hero system. He introduces the idea that all of us have a deep, innate desire to be the hero. But at some point, that desire or that drive to be the hero is diluted or suppressed, either by the self or by society or by the simple fear of existence and uncertainty. Rather than the desire to be the hero, we've instead constructed different ways in which society perceives heroes. It can be seen in our desire to hoard wealth or material goods. Our hero system in the United States idolizes the military to the point of accepting over-militarization to the point of our own society's detriment. Our masculinity heroics, where men are taught that being strong and heroic comes at the cost of suppressing one's emotions. I can see the elements of this system in the way that young men are being roped into toxic influencers describing a type of masculinity that isn't just not attainable, but it's also not really desirable. Or the way that celebrity worship in the age of media is almost a passive degradation to our own self-worth, reduced to a consumer of other people's lives. In the process of denying our death and refusing it truly exists as anything more than a concept, humanity has constructed a complex hero system to get some greater fulfillment within our lives without causing any undue chaos. Because if everyone desires to be this grand hero, Becker argues that it would certainly be a crisis. So, then we must distract ourselves with smaller benchmarks of societally constructed heroism in order to feel some sort of fulfillment when faced with the arbitrary and, quite frankly, ridiculous nature of existence. The crisis of modern society is precisely that the youth no longer feel heroic in the plan for action that their culture has set up. They don't believe it empirically true to the problems of their lives and times. We are living in a crisis of heroism that reaches into every aspect of our social life. The dropouts of university heroism, the business and career heroism, of political action heroism, the rise of anti-heroes. The churning of our age is that the youth have sensed, for better or for worse, a great social historical truth, that just as there are useless self-sacrifices and unjust wars, so too is there ignoble heroics of whole societies. It can be the viciously destructive heroics of Hitler's Germany, or the plain debasing and silly heroics of the acquisition and display of consumer goods, the piling up of money and privileges that now characterizes whole ways of life. Of course, this book is seeped in the civil rights movement unrest and knee-deep in the Vietnam War. I mean, can you blame the people of their lives and times for resisting the hero system that was created for them? However, it feels halfway through the 2020s we're poised for another great civil step. But it's a lot harder to achieve that when it's easier than ever to be sedated. Because our hero system, by and large, doesn't feel empirically true for many of us, especially now, as the hero system is constructed to idolize those who can hoard wealth and materials with a reckless disregard for the impact and scale that consumption is having on our planet. We refuse to unwork our consumer heroics because it exists as the lowest bar of constructed heroism. What it seems as though we're doing is forcing ourselves to play in a small sandbox on a vast beach, because the sandbox is easier to understand. And then we look out at the vastness of this beach and think of those limitless possibilities and are scared by that. We're replacing meaning with distraction, and we are not satisfied. We're not. Becker identifies that there exists such a deep unrest in our society, and I think it's because, it's a lot harder to think about death when it feels like there isn't much worth dying for. We seek that grand purpose. We're fledgling against ourselves. We kill each other over what we perceive to be our purpose. Becker, in his lifetime, never saw the advent of the internet, where consumption heroics wove themselves in with our fear of the world around us and our proclivity to sedate ourselves to that frightening world. And modern society seems hell-bent on not just delaying our inevitability, but refusing to acknowledge that it exists at all. I think the modern conversation around death and dying has not just been replaced by the avoidance of the conversation of aging and dying, but the corporatization and capitalization of staying young. We sell procedures that make us look better. And for what? To run from aging. Because aging, at least in Western culture, is feared so deeply. It represents both the passing of our youth and beauty and also a physical reminder of our closeness to death. And I want to put aside the first half of that conundrum, the youth in the beauty, because corporatization of youth preys upon women and fetishizes youth in a male-dominated society. And I think that could be an essay all on its own. But we can see that the fear of aging and death is not only a primary motivator for some, but also deeply repressed within our society. It remains a fact of life that we run from at all costs. It is our desperation for an immortal ego that is driving us into the dirt without cause and killing us without peace of mind. To kind of bring us back to that, the sandbox in the beach analogy, Becker argues that we are heavily self-imposing our own restrictions. He says that modern man is drinking and drugging himself out of awareness, or he spends his time shopping, which is the same thing. As awareness calls for types of heroic dedication that his culture no longer provides for him, society contrives to help him forget. Or alternatively, he buries himself in psychology, in the belief that awareness, by itself, will be some kind of magical cure for his problems. Shit. But psychology was born with the breakdown of shared social heroisms. It can only be gone beyond with the creation of new heroisms that are basically matters of belief and will, dedication to a vision. And when he talks about dedication to a vision as a model of heroism socially, that brings me in perfectly to that second piece of media that I wanted to talk about. Let's talk about Outer Wilds. Outer Wilds is one of those pieces of media that you can only experience once. If you are here and you haven't played it, I urge you, unless you're the professor of this class that I'm submitting this essay to. Thank you, Professor. Outer Wilds, developed by Mobius Digital and created by Alex Beecham, who's the co-creative head at Mobius Games. The project began as his graduate thesis at USC's Interactive Media MFA program. What I feel is the most striking through this game is the writing of the Nomai. I bring up this game not just because it's transcendentally good, but also because it teaches us and talks about death in such a constructive way. You play as a Hearthian, a species just at the dawn of its spacefaring odyssey, an odyssey that would unravel the mysteries of the universe itself. Because when you arrive out in the stars, wherever you may choose to go, left in the solar system are messages from the species that came before you, the Nomai. What is most striking to me about this game is the wisdom of the Nomai. As you begin to find fragments of them about the universe, you begin to realize that it was a society that is curious, their core tenets to identify and to explain, a species desperate for answers, just as we are. As the first Hearthian with a translator to the Nomai memos that are left around the solar system, the player can unravel the life-extending project that the Nomai were attempting to create. Becker talks at length about the concept of an immortality project, which is a project that someone undergoes in order to attempt to extend their own life or their legacy or what have you. And if you've ever played Outer Wilds, you know that this fits perfectly into what I'm talking about today. But I think when talking about death, this game doesn't just discuss it because the Nomai themselves are no longer there. They only exist as skeletons and messages from the past. No, it continues to remind you of the stakes of death every 22 minutes. This game is so seeped in existentialism. It envelops and capitalizes on our inherent fear of death. I think us staring down the barrel of the end of the universe is something that a lot of us have thought about before, but to be able to experience it in a digital medium makes it phenomenal. In much of the way that we as humans attempt to evangelize purpose within the world, thinking and believing that there must be some higher creator that has called or created us to this earth, so were the Nomai drawn to this universe. They found a signal older than the universe itself. The eye of the universe. And in lieu of spoiling the entire game, I wanted to select a few key pieces of text that I thought really resonated with me, especially as it comes to confronting loss and building an immortality project. But first, let's talk about their arrival in the system. One of the first places that you'll be able to see the Nomai's remnants are in an escape pod on Brittle Hollow. I found the text on Brittle Hollow and the story that it tells to provide such a profound commentary on the way that we think about death and the motivation of death as its existence to continue life. Because this escape pod was once a part of a larger vessel. You can see that right when you step into it. You can also see, in this first settlement, the remnants of a grieving species. But eventually, as they grow up, as the next generation arrives, they use those losses to galvanize their purpose to find the eye of the universe. The next generation built a larger settlement on the other side of this crumbling husk. And in that second settlement, we see an interesting evangelization of the eye of the universe. Death as a motivator for life, the evangelization of a higher meaning, and the quiet acceptance that we may not be called by anything for any higher purpose and may just exist just for the sake of it, just for the pure unlikelihood and biochemistry that we just do. And that is frightening. But in the words of a student of Solanum, that might not be such a bad thing. Now, there are a lot of pieces of text and philosophical debates in Outer Wilds, enough to unpack to make this video an hour long, but I think to keep it concise, what I want to say is I think that we resonate with the Nomai as players, not only because we understand the Nomai's empirical hero system. It's a group of science-based, community-oriented, strong-willed, funny, cute, and it's a poetic species that cares deeply for the ecosystems that we interact with. We can see that care when we see a cave mural that depicts the time that they met the Harthians, our species, when they were mining for ore that would supply with their immortality project. This immortality project, known as the Ash Twin Project, was designed to harvest energy from the sun to send memories back in time 22 minutes. Those memories would be linked from the orbital probe cannon that is searching for the eye of the universe, each time sending the data back in time. The thing that you see up in the sky every time when you load, that's the orbital probe cannon searching for the eye of the universe. Notice it looks in a different direction each time, one of the only things that really changes each time you play. It seems as though this system of heroics is much more understandable and noble than whatever the fuck this is. But where I feel this game provides the most philosophical value is in its ending. Like all things, this too must come to an end. You discover that not just the Nomai have died, but the universe itself is dying. When you finally find the vessel, you find a message from modern Nomai that explain it as such. But regardless of that, we finally find the eye of the universe, and what do we find? Well, But much as every song must come to an end, so must this harmony. A beautiful symphony from the edge of a dying universe. My reaction is to be heartbroken. How could you not be? It never made sense to me, the peace that they found at the end of the universe. How could you not writhe against the very end of it? How could you not weep at the thought of everything you've ever known and ever loved coming to a close? How can we accept that everything must die? And how can we accept that not just as a reason to get up and seize each day as if it were your last, but as an excuse to see the simple realities, the music, the small pleasures, the fire, the marshmallows, the small pleasures that are, after all, so unfathomably unlikely to exist in the first place. I think there is comfort here to be found in the smallness of us, the abandonment of your ego. The realization that you and I are not as important as we think we are is frightening and invigorating. For a long time, I allowed death as a concept to grow and to fester into a malignant presence in my brain. But how could it not be? Allow me to share my thoughts that have given me some modicum of comfort through playing this game, reading this book, and living in that uncertainty. There is no inclination among the musicians around the final campfire to hold on to any note for longer than they should. Doing so might upend what a beautiful symphony we've created. I feel life is just the same. We don't need to hold on to any note of life for longer than we should, for much of the beauty of the song of life forces us to let go and accept its notes. I feel we humans never truly consider how unlikely it is for such a gorgeous symphony to exist at all. We are so desperate to cling to life, yet so easy to take it for granted. The point is, it's not our job to deny or distract ourselves that death is a piece of our humanity, nor is it something that's productive to deny to begin with. All we can do is ask ourselves this: if humanity is nothing but a symphony, what do we want it to sound like?